Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is senior wealth reporter John Hyatt. John, thanks for coming in.
Nice to be with you.
Forbes just released our Billionaires list, and I would love for you to break down the list country by country. Who are some of the top countries that are represented?
Sure. So on this year's World Billionaires list, there are 2,641 billionaires represented. That's down slightly from 2,668 last year. The United States retains its ranking as the number one home of billionaires with 736. That's up one from last year. In second place is China, which retains its spot as number two, although it has fallen about 45 billionaires fewer than last year. Then we have India as well as Germany and Russia.
Great. United States, you said, keeps its top spot. Why does the U.S. harbor so many billionaires?
I think it has to do with the fact that the U.S. economy is just the sort of leading global economy, and the United States is the wealthiest country in the world. And as a result, that bleeds over into just how many billionaires there are.
John, you mentioned that Russia is in the top five, and as we know, Russia has faced conflict within the past year because of its invasion into Ukraine. So has that affected billionaires in Russia at all?
It has. So when we put together last year's list, we saw a steep drop-off in the number of billionaires as the initial economic shock of Russia's invasion of Ukraine really knocked the wealth of Russia's oligarchs. What we've seen in the last year, though, is a recovery in part of those oligarchs' wealth. The number of billionaires in Russia is up from 83 last year to 105 this year. And it's tough to pin down one single reason behind this bump, but we expect that it has to do with the commodities crunch and increasing commodities prices, which is a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So in sort of a twist of irony, the war has in some ways helped the bottom lines of Russian oligarchs.
And did any other countries gain a notable amount of billionaires?
Italy is one other country that gained a notable amount of billionaires, and they're an interesting case. They went from 52 billionaires to 64. Good for the number 7 spot in terms of countries with the most number of billionaires. However, this is less about new businesses than it is about inheritance. So Leonardo Del Vecchio, he was the founder of Luxottica, the sunglasses conglomerate. He passed away last year, and he left his wealth to 6 children, one of his former wives, and a stepson. So that's 8 new billionaires right there, just as a result of their inheriting their father's wealth.
When you're seeing these new billionaires, are you seeing more people become billionaires because of inheritance or because of their businesses?
Traditionally, it's because of their businesses, going public or, raising venture capital at big valuations. But I think because of the economic turbulence we've seen in the last year, where kind of across the board, valuations of companies are down, interest rates are up, restricting, the flow of capital. So I think, in the last year, we've seen a bit of a change in perhaps more people inheriting money as a way to become a billionaire than the traditional route of taking their company public.
John, you said the United States took the top spot for the most billionaires, but China comes in at number 2. What can you tell us about Chinese billionaires?
So it's been a difficult 2 years, actually, for Chinese billionaires. Last year, the number fell off quite a bit. And this year, we saw that again. They're down from 539 billionaires to just 495. Still good for the number 2 spot, but, the second year of a pretty substantial decrease. My colleagues in Asia who I spoke with who study Chinese markets said this is in large part down to the ongoing fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic and China's difficult transition out of their zero COVID policy. as well as a glut in Chinese real estate markets. After over a decade of real estate expansion and development, there's been a real crisis in that sector, and that's bled throughout the Chinese economy.
And how is that going to shake out based on your reporting, based on the people and the experts that you talk to? Do you think the next year looks good for Chinese billionaires?
I think that it will depend on geopolitical circumstances. Trade tension has been, another factor affecting the Chinese economy. I think it will also, rest on China's transition into a sort of post-COVID world and how that affects business.
Moving on down the list to number 3 is India. What can you tell us about the billionaires there?
So India, there are 169 billionaires in India now per Forbes count. That's up just by 3 from last year. However, their collective net worth we have at $675 billion. That's down $75 billion from last year. And, one of the key drivers of that decrease is one man, and that's Gautam Adani, founder and chairman of the Adani Group conglomerate. They have really had a difficult time over the past few months following the allegations by short seller Hindenburg Research over the group's alleged stock market manipulation and accounting fraud, all of which the Adani Group denies. But that's really sent share prices of Adani companies plunging. And as a result, Gautam Adani, who was worth $90 billion last year, is now worth just about $47 billion. So just there, that's $33 billion that's shaved off Indian billionaires' collective net worth.
So you've done a ton of reporting on Adani. What's next for him? Does it look like this is the end when it comes to the allegations and the issues, or is his net worth going to keep plunging?
It's a great question. And it's still too early to say how this situation will resolve. But I think investors and policy watchers are keeping their eyes on a few things. One, India's Securities and Exchange Board of India, that's their main financial regulator. They're conducting an investigation into the Adani Group and Hindenburg's allegations, which is expected to resolve in the next couple of weeks. So that will have a major impact on investor demand for Adani Group shares. Secondly, there are ongoing concerns about leverage and debt within the Adani Group empire. Just this week, we've seen new reporting that the Adani Group is talking with U.S. investors about raising additional capital through a private bond offering. There was a report at an Indian digital news site called The Ken about irregularities in the Adani Group's disclosure of debt that it said it had paid off, but it's not clear it has paid all of that debt off. So there are ongoing concerns about the financial sustainability of the Adani Group. At the same time, though, their share prices have recovered a bit from their low in February, and they still own really high quality assets. They own coal mines, power plants, transmission lines, airports. So they're in a pretty good situation from that perspective. It's just a question of whether investors will stomach all the uncertainty.
You mentioned specifically that they were talking to U.S. investors. Do U.S. investors have any interest in working with them, raising capital for them? What does that look like?
Yeah, so in March, a U.S. investment firm called GQG Capital actually bought about $1.9 billion worth of shares in Adani Group companies from the Adani family. So that was a big bolstering of confidence among foreign investors for the Adani Group. However, the more that the Adani Group seeks additional debt, the more it creates uncertainty for other investors about the financial footing that the Adani Group is in. So I think it still remains to be seen whether or not, foreign investors sort of swoop to the rescue of the Adani Group. In the past few years, the Adani Group has raised about $10 billion of U.S. denominated debt. So that's been a big driving force of some of their mergers and acquisitions in that time frame. So will that continue? We're going to find out.
I do want to switch gears a little bit and move to the United States' neighbor, Canada. What can you tell us about the billionaires in Canada?
So Canada is another interesting example of one big billionaire sort of moving the needle in a big way. So we have 63 billionaires in Canada, down from 64 last year. They're worth a collective $245 billion. That's down $63 billion from last year. But one person, Chengpeng Zhao, is the primary force behind that precipitous decline. So CZ, as he's commonly known, is the founder of Binance, the largest cryptocurrency exchange. And we've marked down CZ's net worth to about 10.5 billion, whereas last year he was worth 65 billion. So, I mean, just that alone, that $45 billion drop is about 2/3 of the overall decrease in Canadian billionaire wealth.
Did the fallout and the instability over the past year when it comes to the crypto market really make an impact on the billionaires list this year?
Absolutely. There are, well, in the case of CZ, his big wealth decline is down to how we value his company, Binance. We look at Binance in terms of, how it compares to, say, the publicly traded Coinbase, another leading crypto exchange whose shares have, really plummeted in the last year or two. So that helps explain why our valuation of Binance is so down, as well as the many regulatory and investigations that they face. But, elsewhere, we've seen crypto billionaires, we've seen their fortunes fall. A lot of folks who have their wealth in private crypto companies that they started, we've marked down those valuations in line with, what analysts are telling us and in line with their publicly traded peers, as well as, big holders of tokens. Bitcoin has had a bit of a rebound over the past couple of weeks, but compared to 12 months ago, 18 months ago, the outlook for crypto is much murkier.
John, I do want to take a step back here and really look at the list as a whole. Did any countries gain a notable amount of billionaires?
No countries gained a notable amount of billionaires, and that's down to sort of the broader macroeconomic conditions that the world has faced over the past year, whether that's inflation or ongoing, supply chain issues or the war in, Ukraine. These factors have made it difficult to build wealth in the sort of low interest rate world that we saw over the last 5 or so years, particularly, during the pandemic when tech companies and growth stocks were taking off. I mean, the country that gained the most number of billionaires, percentage-wise was Russia. But, many of those new billionaires are actually what we call returnees, meaning they, previously featured on Forbes billionaire lists, but then they had fallen off last year's list due to that initial economic shock of the invasion of Ukraine. But now many of them are back. So I think the big question for, next year's list and what we're watching is how economic and financial conditions evolve and whether they evolve in a way that is supportive of wealth creation or whether it continues to clamp down on wealth creation.
And as the war in Ukraine continues, is this going to make Russia's billionaires even richer?
I think for some of them it could. I mean, in large part, it depends on a billionaire by billionaire case. For example, those that have been sanctioned by, Western entities who can't do business with trading partners they once relied on, that could, hamper those billionaires' wealth. At the same time, we are sort of seeing a remaking of the geopolitical and, economic alliances that sort of dominate our, world economy. And so, because of the commodities crunch and the sort of broader macro effect of Russia's invasion, I think some of these billionaires will be okay in the long run. And, they're in a situation where, Russia's economy is so dominated by the state, and the ability of these companies and these oligarchs to maintain their grip on power is part of a symbiotic relationship they have with Vladimir Putin. So, as long as Vladimir Putin remains in power, he needs things to be stable. And, oligarchs and their businesses are one form of stability in the Russian economy.
And John, on a personal note, looking at the list country by country, did anything surprise you?
I think I was most surprised by just how it was a difficult year for, a lot of billionaires. I think in this sort of age of wealth inequality, we, think that the rich continue to get richer while the rest of us suffer. And that's not incorrect. But at the same time, we've seen fortunes of the wealthy plunge pretty precipitously in the last year, especially the Silicon Valley high flyers and the tech founders and, the people that have really done well over the last 5-10 years have kind of gotten a jolt of reality that higher interest rates and the economic slowdown have prompted.
John Hyatt, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brittany.